Hey everyone, today I wanted to try to have an open discussion with you guys regarding Monster Hunter Rise's difficulty or lack thereof, and specifically when it comes to just how the game actually lets you handle the progression and how much of a challenge it actually is. I thank you so much for actually leaving comments, and in this video specifically, I would definitely encourage that. I usually don't ask for that, but you guys are very good at leaving comments and your opinions on it, and definitely hitting me up on Twitter as well. And this is one of those topics that I definitely want to get everyone's take on, because everybody perceives difficulty, and specifically game difficulty, a little bit differently. And in this game, there definitely seems a bit of a spectrum when it comes to just how people are perceiving the challenge of the game itself and how they're actually approaching it, specifically when compared to Monster Hunter World, which was, for all intents and purposes, one of the easiest Monster Hunter titles known to date. I guess one of the first things that need to be brought up is how much just the wire bug actually changes the mechanics of the game, so much so that people are definitely abusing them. Wire bug skills are just kind of one of those things that are so easily spammable in their own way after you just use a specific combo that it just kind of make the game a little bit easier in that aspect. So you can definitely just auto recover with the evade, and you could just dash out of situations that are like usually are going to be punishing, where typically a monster would just kind of one hit combo you, like, you know, they hit you once, you get knocked on the floor, then they just truck you over again and then you're dead. Those situations are now easily avoidable with the evade ability from the wire bug. And then if you're actually on the offensive, you do a couple of combos and then automatically use a silkbind attack and just kind of just do massive damage, which obviously adds up over time throughout an entire fight. So you get into a situation where so many tools are available to you that I feel like it makes the game a little bit easier to deal with, and that's what I feel like people are conflating when it comes to just the game being easier overall. I've seen some comparisons with the Clutch Claw, how limiting it was in nature because it was simply just tied to you specifically attaching or harnessing yourself onto the monster in Monster Hunter World, where the wire bug actually just lets you traverse just openly. It has no real limiters. It doesn't really matter if there's a monster around you or even in your vicinity. You could just use it for traversal or just getting out of the way altogether. Because it's not tied to the monster, it just opens up a different plethora of possibilities. So it changes the dynamic of the game so much that I feel like people are like automatically making that comparison of the game being too easy because the silkbind attacks are so diverse and they're just giving you so many options. I actually don't have the direct data or numbers if monster health or damage output for each one of the weapons has actually been buffed or lowered. A lot of arguments were made like Insect Glaive was nerfed, but then you actually look at the silkbind attacks and some of the things actually make up for it. For example, I'm using Insect Glaive, and for a weapon that everybody keeps saying that it was like completely nerfed to the ground and is worthless to use in this game, I'm doing crazy insane damage numbers. So for me personally, which is I'm a first-time user, and by the way, thank you for everyone who voted on that poll that I put out on Twitter asking like what weapon I should main. A lot of people voted. Insect Glaive ended up being the winner for some reason, so I'm actually sticking to my word, and that's the weapon that I'm actually using. And I'm having a blast with it, but a lot of people did say it was one of the weakest weapons in the demo, yet, you know, I'm seeing an insane damage output. It's not the same as Longsword, don't get me wrong, it's not even close to that. Hunting Horror, of course, does insane damage, plus the buffs that you get, but for a weapon that a lot of people said it was really weak, is doing extremely well for me. But that's not really the point of this discussion. It's more about I'm actually perceiving the difficulty of the game, because being in the air, being able to move around, and then on top of that I have the freedom of silkbind attacks and the wire bug to just dash out of situations. I'm seeing that just I'm not necessarily too concerned about what the monsters are actually doing. I rarely ever get myself into a real tough situation that I can't recover from. And I feel like a lot of the weapons are just given that flexibility. I know for a fact that almost all of the weapons have some sort of silkbind attack that is a direct escape attack on top of the evade wire bug ability that you already have by default. So just that versatility, I think, is what people are kind of missing when it comes to difficulty of the game actually just being too easy. I don't think that there's like damage parameters that have been tweaked to the point that a monster just simply isn't relevant or isn't strong enough. In fact, I think the argument is that a lot of the monsters have had moves added to them or just different abilities that they just didn't have before. Like Gyarados, for example, is completely revamped. Basarios is completely revamped. These monsters are just way tougher than they were before. They're more aggressive. They do just different things that they did in the past. And people are conflating like just the fact that they are kind of easily able to just hunt either online or by themselves with others, conflating that the game is just straight up easy. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that through progression, naturally, I saw four distinct, or I should rather say three distinct, excluding endgame, of course, which is like the rampage situation all on its own, and I'm not even going to get into that. I made a video about that just a couple weeks ago, so I'm not going to get into the whole rampage situation. But just, I saw three difficulty spikes, specifically when I was just playing through the story. The first Magnum Malo encounter, when you get to just fight him the first time around, that fight is just, whatever gear you have available at that point in time, that's a real fight. You don't have access to some really, really high-end gear, especially with abilities or skills or anything like that from your armor set, that would help you in any way, shape, or form to the degree of that fight making it extremely easy. I just don't agree with that at all. That first Magnum Malo fight, especially, I think, even when you see it online, a lot of people were carting. Like, I think it was the first online fight that I actually saw people cart, whereas like fighting easier stuff before that, it was just not even the case. The second was actually the jump into high rank, just because your armor by then is just, you know, dialed back defensively, so you start taking huge chunks of damage when you're not necessarily have high enough defense to be able to withstand some of the attacks that the monsters are ready to dish out. And then when you get to the last tier of high rank matches, essentially when the last wave of monsters are appearing, that you start to see just that the game starts demanding that you actually have a comparable armor set and perhaps all the skills available in your tool set to be able to just match the damage that these monsters are actually doing. Again, it's more about how defensively and how well you're adjusting to the monsters themselves. It's not necessarily how well you're actually doing damage wise. I think that when it comes to like how much damage you're actually able to put out, I think if you're comparably just keeping up armor sets, updating every, 5 monsters or so that appear, I think you'll be doing just fine. But obviously, if you have like an armor set that's low rank and you take it into high rank and you try to use that to carry you throughout, I don't think that's necessarily going to work. I actually don't know if people are actually, when they're playing solo, gathering the birds to be able to boost themselves and buff themselves accordingly. While you don't necessarily have to cap yourself with that, and certainly you can go into a fight without using them if you want to give yourself a little bit of a bigger challenge. I do think they're helpful altogether. So if you're going into a fight and you're not gathering birds and then you're saying, well, the game is too easy, okay, perhaps, I don't know, you're some type of excellent hunter or whatever. But I think for the most part, if you're gathering birds and you're getting into a fight and then you're complaining about the difficulty, well, I mean, you are making the fight easier by just getting birds automatically. That's just kind of how the game is built around. This is one of the developer arguments that they made during several interviews, where they specifically spoke about, like, if you gather birds to make yourself stronger and you go into a fight, of course the fight is going to be easier. If you don't gather birds and then you get into a fight, it will be tougher. This is just common sense. So in the same way that your armor set basically dictates how well you should be able to handle hits. If you don't gear up properly and you have a low defense, you're going to take massive hits once you get into a higher rank, or definitely higher damage dealing monsters. That's just kind of the way it goes. So all in all, I think the difficulty discussion has been interesting. I don't necessarily know how legitimate it actually is. I do think that the rampage fight, specifically when you're dealing with apex monsters by yourself, if you're dealing with them offline, those fights are a damn pain in the ass. I'm not sure if it's a difficult thing or it's just like those things just have massive like health pools. You have to chip at them hard. So I don't necessarily agree with the argument that the game is too easy, especially when it comes to like apex monsters in the later part of the end game. Obviously that is end game related, so this is why I differentiate that separately. But like just progressing through the game naturally, I did see a couple of difficulty spikes and like clear tells that the game is like, okay, you need to have some sort of common sense as to how you're approaching these fights. Otherwise it's gonna, you're not gonna have a great time. But yeah, that's about it for this video. I wanted to try a little bit of something different because the difficulty discussion, I think, is a little bit skewed because it's based on how you perceive the game and how you're actually playing it. There are a lot of tryhards out there saying like, well, this game is too easy because I'm an excellent hunter. It's like, look, no one's impressed by that. I don't really care. If you've been playing the game since the first one that came out, that's cool. I mean, I've been playing since like Monster Hunter 3, I think. So I would never consider myself one of these like perfect hunters or like trying to get the best times in anything, that's completely irrelevant to me. I just like having fun. I like the game, the mechanics, all of that. So I see the difficulty argument a little bit different, like I explained before. So I actually want to hear your guys' take, so please do leave a comment if you are finding the game too easy, if you are finding the difficulty adjustable due to the birds essentially just giving you permanent buffs throughout a hunt, or if the game is just too hard for you. I would definitely love to hear your take on that. But that's about it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.